Hey guys, and welcome to this week's episode of the Top Producing Zone podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Michael Jin.
And I'm your co-host, Shane Carvalho.
So I want to revisit a topic that we talked about kind of earlier on this year, Shane, and that was kind of along the lines of, having an abundance mindset versus having a scarcity mindset. And the reason I want to revisit this is, we've talked about goal setting. We've talked about kind of setting yourself up, here in the last few months of 2023, setting yourself up for success in 2024. But one of the interesting things I've come to realize, and it's actually troubled me quite a bit, is, I've talked to agents, and one of the common themes I think I hear is, hey, we feel like we can't plant our flag here in the Bay Area because, your brokerage or my brokerage, doesn't have enough agents that offer us opportunities to find leads. And to me, it's just, it's troublesome and it's bothersome because it's like, well, why can't you go figure it out? And I think that kind of just leads to the whole, abundance and scarcity mindset that we've talked about before.
Yeah. And you can actually take this in so many different directions, right? Because if you think about the classic behavior, obviously, I've been in the business since 99. Look at the movement of agents from brokerage to brokerage. They always assume the grass is going to be greener. The problem is, and this is going to be hard for this to correct, is the fact that agents don't want to take responsibility for their own success. They keep looking to the next shiny brokerage. They're going to have leads or they're going to have this. Because even agents that don't choose to join us, for instance, there's agents that have actually really loved you and I, but they were hung up on, I don't have a physical office, or I don't have this, I don't have that. And it's funny because then when they have a physical office, then they either don't use it or they just go socialize and don't get anything done. Or then they realize when they're getting crappy leads from where they do end up that, oh, okay. So yeah, you can go in a lot of different directions, but I think that first and foremost, owning or taking the responsibility for creating your own success is very important. And obviously it's negative Nancy if they, don't have the abundance side, which you and I both experienced.
Well, yeah. And it is interesting. I go back to, the interview that we did with Michael Valdez, right? And we talked about, it's interesting a lot of times, to your point, like agents who are interested in joining us. And I guess we've seen this enough where you can kind of figure out if they're going to be successful or not. Like when they start asking you a lot of questions like, oh, yeah, to your point, like, am I going to get leads? Am I going to get opportunities for open houses? What can you do for me? What can you do for me? What can you do for me? And, it's one of those things where it's like, yeah, you probably asked this question to every other brokerage out there. And to me, it's like, okay, then do you not really understand, I guess, the power of what it is our brokerage offers is number one. And then number two, it's, well, what are you really going to be doing for yourself? And what can you do for yourself? And that's just immediately right off the bat, a very limiting belief that a lot of agents have.
And the limiting beliefs, it's funny because there's a couple agents even within our group that I'm friends with, and I call them out sometimes, and I need to be called out because even I can be guilty at times of this, but I'm not going to be able to. Like this one agent I was talking to yesterday was like, yeah, I'd love to get involved in some of the flip investment stuff you do, but I'm a woman, so I just can't do it. I'm just like, what? Well, because contractors rip women off like mechanics. I'm like, that's such a limiting belief, right? Because I get that. Has that ever happened? Sure. Is that something that's known? Sure. But the thing is that people need to understand that they don't have to be like the average or what they hear. They have to kind of live in their own mindset and believe, because we've gone to mindset so much this year too. And especially in times like these, which, obviously I think it's more hype than really being tough times in the market. But, even times like this, mindset's more important than ever.
No, it is. And it's interesting that you use that word can't, because I go to this quote and it's kind of cliche, but I go to this quote from Henry Ford, right? It's like, and he said, if you believe you can, or you believe you can't, either way, you're right.
I saw you post that.
Yeah.
That is such a solid quote. That goes back to mindset. And that's why, clearly, if you say you can't, you're not going to be able to, because when you don't, you're already accomplishing what you said you were going to accomplish, right?
Yeah. As soon as you believe it, your thoughts, your actions are going to align with that. And here's something else I want to throw out to you and kind of get your thoughts on. I feel like, when people say they can't do something, it really means in reality that they won't do something. And there's a difference there.
Okay, so really quick. So I always, because I got upgraded to first class again today, right? Every trip I've been meeting somebody, right? So today I meet this guy from down here, super interesting guy, has a TV show, has been in title insurance, just really, really interesting, successful guy that lives down here in LA. And anyway, he, was talking about the episodes and what he's been doing. And he was telling me this story about this Stanford student that was late to class one day. And there was a problem on the board. I guess this is the accidental genius. So there's a problem on the board, a really difficult math problem. And he took it down to do it for homework. What he didn't realize was before he got there, they had told the class that nobody's been able to solve this problem for 100 years.
Isn't that interesting? Yeah.
This guy didn't hear that part. This guy solved it. And they gave him his PhD on the spot. He was done. School was done. He came back. They gave him his PhD, but that had not been solved in 100 years. If that guy had been sitting in class, if he had been on time to class, there's a chance he would have never been able to accomplish that.
Isn't that amazing? Isn't that just amazing? The power of the mind, the power of belief, right?
And the thing is he was tricked in a way because, if he already had been preconditioned to, you're not going to be able to solve it, it's kind of like the negative or, the lack of abundance mindset. Oh yeah, we're not gonna be able to anyway. So, whatever. It's like when you're already programmed, they're not going to be able to, there's not going to be enough effort because you're already meeting expectation. Oh yeah, I can't do this. Oh, it's not going to happen. There's not a moment there where you try to push further.
And it does go back to like what I posted this past Monday. It was like, if you think about it, even from like just like the business environment in the market, right? Blockbuster is a great example.
Oh my God.
They probably told you, right? They never innovated. They never tried to figure out, okay, what can I do next? Right? They kind of got stuck in their ways, and look what happened. They get displaced by Netflix because Netflix probably wasn't telling themselves, well, what can I do? Right? What if I want to put video online? Like, why can't I do that? Instead of asking, why can't I do that? They're probably asking themselves, how can I do that? And you just keep asking yourself how, and you get through that.
Yeah, I'll never forget. And shoot, I can't believe I'm drawing a blank on his name now. Big Jets fan, big social media guy on the East Coast. What's his name?
Big Jets fan.
Dude, his family sold wine, and I can't believe I'm drawing a blank. Anyway, it'll come to you, but check this out. So you were talking about Blockbuster. How about Toys R Us?
Oh yeah, exactly.
Toys R Us was the day you stop innovating, the day you die. And that was Toys R Us, just like Blockbuster, right? And it'll come to me in a while when I'm not trying to remember.
Well, and it's interesting because, like I take this back to real estate, right? And I've talked to agents in this area, and, one of the things that they've said is, hey, our brokerage, we don't do enough luxury, right? And the luxury space here is already dominated by agents from other brokerage. And I hear that, and I'm just like, okay. The first thought I have to myself is, well, at some point, those other brokerages were also starting off, right? And there were probably already agents that were doing luxury in the space before they came along. So how come they were able to figure a way out and plant their flag, and now you feel like you can't? I mean, that's literally what I'm thinking to myself is, I mean, obviously it's almost like kind of like you see them as competition. I almost would kind of see them as an example of it can be done, because you're constantly like having grown up in Cupertino in the Bay Area, I'm constantly seeing like new people taking over that market. It's like every 5 years. It's not like it's the same old names with all these like open house signs or for sale signs out there. It's constantly changing. So it's like, obviously those people figured out a way to stake their claim in the market. So to me, it's like, instead of looking at them as some kind of barrier, look at them as inspiration, because they were able to supplant themselves over somebody else. And that means you can too. It doesn't really matter what brokerage you're part of.
Well, in the land of startups, I mean, you better have some confidence in the land of startups.
Exactly. And it really gets me to this idea of like, okay, so if you're saying you can't, in reality, you're probably saying you won't, which means you're probably saying you don't want to, which ultimately leads to the question that maybe you should be asking yourself is it a high enough priority for you? And what's really driving your motivation behind this, right? Because we've talked about this in other podcasts as well. It's like, if it's not a high enough priority, if you don't know why it's driving you, like, of course you're not going to make it a priority, or of course you're not going to try to figure it out, right? It's not a bad thing. It doesn't mean that, like, we're lazy or bad or unambitious, right? I think it's actually a really honest question to ask yourself and to dig into and be like, okay, well, why am I saying I can't? And is it because truly it's not a high enough priority for me? And if it's not, then why is it not? And I think those are some honest questions that anybody who's running a business should really be asking themselves.
It's true. And the thing is that, part of it just could be, laziness, honestly, at the end of the day, if it doesn't come easy, because that's the other problem with the advancement of, technology and social media and everything else. The old school, let's pay our dues, isn't really something that's top of mind. People want to have instant success and I don't want to generalize all people, because there are hard workers out there, but I'm just saying, like, so-and-so is making YouTube videos and he's doing $100 million a year. So I just did YouTube videos for a month. It's not working. Then off to the next thing. Right. Like, there's that instant gratification that could be another thing. But honestly, the whole jumping brokerages, like agents jumping brokerages, that's always like, look, I've been around since 1989. That has always been a thing. Just always, it's just that today it's different things that they're looking for. Now with technology, it's, well, what kind of like online lead systems do you have, or how are you, utilizing AI, and, how are we, like, basically it's a different game. But it's the same basic principles. They're going, because now teams and everything is a thing, and back then it wasn't that way. Back then it was really, you were looking to be you and the broker, and what could the broker do for you? Now a lot of this, well, when you go to this broker, it's going to be part of this team, or this, you know what I mean? So it's the same, at the end of the day, it's the same thing, looking for greener pastures. It's just different programs.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. Yeah. And I appreciate kind of your perspective on that. And, you also bring up another point where you were saying, like, somebody who's doing video online for a month versus somebody who's, like, bringing in hundreds of thousands of subscribers. Well, and we've talked about this in the past too. It gets down to, instant gratification. And also, like, everybody these days, I feel like, get caught in the comparison trap.
Yeah. And that's because of social media, because now it's so much more visible. And it's a very bad idea. Comparison is always a bad idea. But the thing is that what makes it even worse is that people believe what they see on social media. See, we didn't used to have that problem before, right? Now it's like, the facts are out there. So if you're really disturbed by somebody, go check the numbers. You shouldn't care anyway, and you shouldn't be comparing. But at the end of the day, it's like, go be a fact checker if it's going to give you some kind of peace of mind. But you really shouldn't even care. You should just do the best that you can and not worry about what other people are doing. But yeah, that's, social media has brought in that side of things.
And it's tough. And I think, again, it's kind of that mindset. Like, I think people miss out on the fact that, like, somebody who today is probably at 100,000 subscribers. Well, it's not like they started a month ago, right? It's probably like they started a year, 2, 3 years ago, and they've just been incredibly consistent with it, right? And they've slowly built it up. And again, it kind of goes back to, this idea of, okay, are you looking at somebody to compare yourself to them, or should you be kind of looking at somebody to set, kind of the vision for where you want to go? And I go back to, like, one of the podcast interviews we did with Norm from Liftoff Agent, right? He'll follow other folks, like Ryan Pineda. He'll follow folks like, Mike Sherrard. But it's kind of cool because he gets really excited, right? And we could tell his energy level from our interview. He gets very excited, like, sharing about what he's seen other people do, because really it's also a potential guidepost, right? It's like, these people have been there. They've kind of figured it out. So it's like, okay, if they can do it, then that means I can get there too. And, like, they've already have a tried and true system. So let me see what they're doing, how they're pushing the boundary, right? And then it's not like you have to think about everything from scratch, which I think is amazing, right? You can take a look at what they're doing and R&D it, right? and make it your own.
Yeah, well, I definitely agree with the fact that, if you want to follow people that have been successful in areas you want to be successful, instead of reinventing the wheel, sure, look to what they're doing and having success with, but look at that from the perspective of just getting ideas or inspiration, not comparison. And if you can do that, then that's totally healthy. But the moment it goes to, comparison, that's just a bad deal.
And it's interesting. I was reading an article on this whole concept of can't versus won't, and in athletics. Actually, I found a blog dealing with athletics, and it's interesting. Like this one athletics group, they don't allow the word can't, but they also had other words and phrases that are commonplace, and I didn't even realize until I started reading this. But it is true, like the mindset shift that happens when you use certain words versus others. And I'll kind of throw out 3 examples. The first one is like, don't use the word have to. Replace the word have to with the word get to, which is an interesting concept. The next one is replace should with will. And the third one is my favorite because I'm a Star Wars fan, is eliminate try, right? Because, there's Yoda. It's like, there is no try, only do or do not. And it's interesting. Yeah. Like even
we need a Star Wars episode.
we got to do a Star Wars episode on mindset. That would be great. But it's interesting, like just looking at the subtle shift of a word here and there really does have a difference. Like, for example, like replacing have to with get to, right? What's the change there? It changes an action from sounding like it's a punishment or it's like required, like, oh, I have to go do this, I have to go do that, to an opportunity and a reward. Like, I get to do this. I'm privileged enough to be able to do this, because not everybody can, if you really think about it.
Well, a big one right now is life is not happening to me, it's happening for me. And especially in times like this where you see a lot of agents struggling, you just got to keep that one at top of mind, because this is a very easy time for agents that are not having as much success. Very easy time to be in that victim mindset, right? So it's not happening to you, it's happening for you. So yeah, no, these are good things. We should probably post these in front of us so we look at them all day.
We could probably get them ordered on like some nice signs or something and just put it in front of us.
I mean, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so how, like, I mean, obviously no one's perfect at this, right?
Nobody's perfect. You just let me down, bro.
Yeah, just show me somebody who's perfect. I'd love to see that.
I look up to you.
Well, sorry to ruin your bubble. But I mean, what do you feel like would be like the biggest challenge you're facing today in terms of, just abundance versus like the scarcity mindset or can't? Like, what are some common pitfalls you find yourself falling into when it comes to like telling yourself you can't versus, trying to have a more positive outlook on it or a more abundant outlook on it?
Well, in reality, just, the struggles I've faced, both health and, with some bad business things that have happened, I find myself getting tangled up in, well, there's a couple different sides to it. One is just overwhelmed with just, being pulled in a lot of different directions, kind of not being in the normal routine. So, the last like 6 months or so, I've really tried to, rope in and really get refocused on just the things I love and enjoy, which is really just real estate and the construction, right? So I think that one of the things I've had to do is just cut, these other things from my mind and not let them influence me. Because it's easy to, I mean, when you're talking about abundance, and everything else, we haven't really talked about is the fact that, when things do go bad, you have a bad business partnership, something goes wrong, someone takes advantage of you. It's easy to get in that anger, like I want to kill somebody mode. And that's actually a way of sabotaging yourself, even though it's not like, because you probably I don't know if you've ever thought about this angle, but it's like when you're so busy putting so much energy towards what is not abundance, whether it was stolen, taken in some way, whether it's something that failed, whatever, when you get caught up in that, that's not abundance mindset. I mean, you know what I mean? So, and we don't really, that doesn't become top of mind, but I mean, I've, given a lot of thought to, even my own experiences, obviously we still carry on, real estate's still going well. Could I be doing a lot better? Yeah, totally. Like, and I think that, you know, instead of just calling it abundance or not abundance, I'd like to say more like it's a distraction to the mindset, right? Because it's like for me, I've always lived an abundance mindset, since the beginning of my career. It's one of the reasons I've always found myself being successful is because I've always kind of marched to the beat of my own drum. Well, I'm
Yeah.
human too, and I've caught myself, but it's just in my case, it's different. It's just a different type of being out of abundance mindset, right? And so I think that if you do catch yourself, and this is the hard part, and I try to coach on this with the agents I mentor, is you have to continue to perform the money making activities and the positive actions for your business, regardless of the outcome. But bigger than that yet is continuing to make them a priority, regardless of what's going on. Like
Yeah.
you got to find a way. And I'm not perfect at this, believe me. And because you know me, but you have to be able to like compartmentalize. I can't even say that word half the time, but compartmentalize
Yeah.
like whatever the struggles are. And you got to just plug those in somewhere. Like, you know what? I'm going to spend an hour dealing with this issue, right? But then the rest of the time you carry on with that schedule and keep doing the activities you've always done. And don't let these negative things kill your abundance mindset, because literally these negative things can drive you, to a very bad place, a very dark place. And at the end of the day, people that do you wrong are the ones winning in that circumstance. You're really hurting your health and hurting yourself. And so I think that that's something that we really didn't get into, because it's not always that black and white, abundance or not abundance. It's like, aside from just consciously making those decisions or having that mindset in real life, what gets thrown at you that can derail you, because sometimes it's not just abundance or no abundance. It's like, oh shit, I'm getting divorced all of a sudden, or oh no, I just had a major health crisis. Like I can relate to those things. Hell, you've been through some of that, right? So it's like, you suddenly wake up and, like I had a herniated disc in my neck when I turned 40. So about 8 years ago, I was down for about 3 months, and that came out of nowhere. Dude, I was selling houses on the couch on my back on ice packs and medicated like for about 3 months. So it's like, it's like things come at you and, unexpected curveballs. It's in those moments that you have to dig deep and find a way. But at the end of the day, we're still human. So yeah, if you ask me, like, what do you got to do? It's back to basics and the focus and just, mind over matter, really. I guess you just have to have a strong mindset in, not going to the distractions and also not letting the results, of bad things that occur, not letting that dictate where you're going or the success you're going to have. You can't let that hold you back. And that's easier said than done.
Well, no, and I, as you're sharing this, I think I go back to what you were saying earlier. It's very much, this idea of, situations that happen to you versus, things that happen for you. Right. And I agree. Like there's curveballs that life throws your way. And I think sometimes, one of the keys, like for me, like as I was going through the divorce, it's kind of like, it's hard. Right. And to your point, it's like, it's picking yourself up one day at a time. I think giving yourself grace, right? Knowing that you're not going to get, you're not going to be perfect every day, but you're taking small steps in the right direction, right? And there's interesting.
Do you give yourself grace?
I try to. I think that's one of the hardest things for me. And we've talked about this in other episodes. Like, both you and I are like very like perfection oriented and driven people, right? I realize this at work too. I was talking to a coworker the other day where I'm like, yeah, I at work sometimes I feel like, there's like the imposter syndrome that I feel sometimes, at some point it's like the higher up I go, the more I'm expected to know. And I feel like there are days where I don't feel like I know shit. And then at some point I'm going to get like discovered or figured out like to be a fraud. And it's interesting because I was talking with my coworker we were reflecting on this, and we're like, yeah, sometimes it's also just perspective, right? Like, we're probably our own harshest critics, right? I know I am. And there are times where it's like, I feel like I might be going at like 50%, but to somebody else, I might be going at 100%. The other thing I realized that was really important to me, as I was going through like the divorce, and it's kind of really helped my mindset since then, is, you've heard the serenity prayer, right?
Right.
And that's one really that, like, in the past I was like, oh, it's a nice little quote on a painting or on a wall or whatever, on like a visual, right? But I think when I was going through my divorce, that's really when it kind of hit home to me. And that's really like, it was a big, powerful mindset shift for me, in the sense of like, okay, when things happen, what do I have control over? Right. And some things you just don't have control over. And sometimes I feel like that's where I used to get stuck. And sometimes I still do, is like, I try to control things that I have no control over, which gets me just into a negative spiral. Right. But the serenity prayer, for those that haven't heard about it, is it goes, God, grant me the serenity to accept things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference.
Exactly. I had it memorized as well.
I know, right? And the only thing, we can do is, just there are certain things that we can control and other things that we can't, like whether it's a bad business deal or whether it's somebody, like a business partner, like, not doing the right thing and screwing us over. It's like, we can't control their actions. Right. But to your point, like, we can control our action, our actions, our reactions. Right. And we're all human. So there's going to be that, anger and that frustration, and that's all okay. Right. I think it's good to embrace that. It's good to let that out in healthy ways. And then just slowly kind of, put yourself back on track the best you can.
Yeah, you mean like no death threats?
Yeah, that would be good. Or, if there are death threats, not on recorded, not on recordings or, in front of other people.
I mean, it's hard not to take it personal. Like for me, I've been hosed by people that are close to me. You know what I mean? Like it could have been an absolute stranger, somebody you don't know, but it's just very personal when it's someone in your circle, especially and for me, it was especially in this, under the circumstances, right? Like it just really like tough circumstances. So yeah, I think that that's another thing, when you're talking about your mindset and in your long career and as you get older and stuff in life, being careful not to allow those experiences to change how you are as a person. Like be more careful with the decisions you make, but then don't go be harder on people or change who you are because you got a couple of bad apples. You know what I mean? Just be smarter, make better decisions, get things, in writing, which is another thing we've talked about. And just, and then also just like the kind of, it's like, it seems like for me where I've gotten burned is when I'm actually really helping people out. Like, business is business. Just keep a clear boundary on what business is, and friendship separate, just here's how it is. And if you don't like it, go find somebody else, It's just, and the other thing too is the fact that, not going and complicating your life when you already have skills, you already have the skills and the assets to do a lot of what you want to do. If you're going to pull somebody in, be really clear, especially like in our case. I mean, some of the stuff we've been through, we really don't need anybody, so it's like, don't bring, don't bring bad people into the party for no reason. So anyway.
No, I think that's great. I think that's probably, a good place to kind of end this, unless there's something else you want to add. But I think in recap, we definitely talked about, we kind of dived a little bit deeper into this abundance and scarcity mindset. We talked about, when you're saying can't, do you actually mean you won't? And is it high enough priority for you? Right. We talked about other words that might potentially, have the same impact as developing at an abundance, a scarcity mindset, and what the impact of that can be. And also just, like it's not a black and white situation, right? There's always going to be curveballs that are thrown our way, and how to best, adapt to that, embrace that, and continue to move forward from that.
Well, and taking responsibility for your actions to get the results you want, and not looking to other brokerages or other people or other teams to have more success. It needs to come from within. And it's like you could chase your tail and keep jumping around for your whole career, and you're never going to get anywhere. If you're not willing to take, if you're not willing to make the commitment and take the appropriate steps to have success, then, find a different career. Because this is definitely, it's, and I don't want to say it's one of the tougher things, because obviously, I guess what I mean is just, this is one of those businesses where your independent performance, your mindset, like you're in full control of generating your income. Obviously, there's much more sophisticated, complicated things, like your engineering. There's surgeons and doctors, and there's people like in law. Like there's a lot of really complex things out there. I'm not even trying to compare to any of that. I'm just talking about, this is one of those types of businesses where you're completely self-run, self-driven, self-performing. Like, there is nothing. Your income is zero until you go create it. And so, that's never going to change. And you have to know that you can do it from within. If you happen to land at a brokerage where you get a deal here and there, maybe a good referral or relocation, whatever, that's just a bonus. Like, don't count with that. Just be like, oh, my brokerage is cool. Like, I have a great referral network and I just got a couple of referrals. Great. But don't count with that. Right? So yes,
if you don't take charge of your own business, no one else is going to take charge of it for you. I think that's the good way.
That's probably a good recap of kind of the meat of what we're trying to talk about initially. And then obviously we went on some tangents, which is normal and healthy. Got to cover all the, we got to cover all the non-conforming parts.
Exactly. Yep. That's what I love about this. All right. Well, guys, I hope you enjoyed this week's episode of the Top Producing Zone podcast. Hope it was helpful, and we'll catch you on next week's episode.
Take care.